She was my heroine, and I blew up my family to get clean. It's been 3 years, and the silence in my house is still loud enough to wake me up at night. People talk about affairs like they are lapses in judgment, like you tripped and fell into someone else's bed. For some, maybe it is. A drunken mistake at a conference, a lingering glance that went too far. But for me, it wasn't a mistake. It was a regimen. It was a needle in the arm, administered daily, hourly, minutely. Her name was Elena. That's not her real name, but it sounds enough like it to make my stomach turn when I type it. For 2 years, Elena was the oxygen mask I put on before helping others. That's how I rationalized it. That is the sick, twisted logic of the addict. I convinced myself truly, deeply believed that I could not be the father my children needed, or the provider my wife expected without the dopamine hit Elena provided. I was a functional addict. On the surface, I was super dad. I was the guy at the PTA meetings. I was the husband who did the dishes without being asked. I was the man who held his wife's hand during her mother's funeral. But underneath that veneer, I was rotting. I was hollowed out, filled only by the vibration of a phone in my pocket, the mechanism of the high. It started innocently enough, as these things always do. Professional correspondence that bled into venting about work, which bled into venting about life. Then came the jokes. Then the good morning texts. Those texts, God, those texts. They were the drug. The physical side, that was rare. In 2 years, we met physically maybe 6 times. But the digital connection was constant. It was an umbilical cord. I would wake up at 5:30 a.m., ostensibly to go for a run, but really to sit in the bathroom with the fan on, reading her breakdown of her dreams, sending her my thoughts on the sunrise. I remember one Tuesday, my son, Leo, was 6 at the time. He was crying because he couldn't find his cleats for soccer practice. My wife, Sarah, was already stressed, trying to wrestle our toddler into a car seat. The noise was overwhelming, the screaming, the rushing, the sheer domestic chaos. Normally, I would have snapped. I would have yelled at Leo to be more responsible. I would have been grumpy with Sarah. Instead, I felt the buzz against my thigh. Elena, just remember, you're their hero. Breathe. A flood of calm washed over me. It was chemical. I physically felt my heart rate drop. I smiled, crouched down, found Leo's cleats in the mudroom, and hugged him. I kissed Sarah on the forehead and told her she was doing a great job. I was patient. I was kind. I was present. But I wasn't really there. I was high on Elena. I was being a good father because of her. That was the lie I told myself to sleep at night. I told myself I was outsourcing my emotional needs so I wouldn't burden Sarah. I told myself I was saving my marriage by getting my validation elsewhere. That is the memory that haunts me the most. It strips away any romantic notion of a star-crossed lover's narrative and reveals this for what it was: grimy, desperate addiction. It was the 3rd time we met. We couldn't go to a hotel. Too risky, paper trails, credit cards. We couldn't go to our houses, so we met in the parking lot of a sprawling, semi-abandoned industrial park near the interstate. It was mid-July. The heat was oppressive, the air thick with humidity and the smell of tar. She drove a mid-size SUV. I parked 3 rows away. I remember walking toward her car, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I wasn't thinking about my vows. I wasn't thinking about Sarah making lasagna at home. I was thinking only of the fix. She popped the trunk. We didn't even sit in the seats. We were too paranoid about being seen through the windows. We crawled into the back, pushing aside jumper cables and a bag of potting soil. She pulled the trunk lid down, leaving it cracked just an inch for air, but it wasn't enough. It was pitch black in there. It smelled of rubber, stale, fast food, and intense, terrifying intimacy. We were sweating profusely within minutes. It wasn't erotic in the way movies are erotic. It was frantic. It was 2 drowning people climbing on top of each other, trying to breathe. I remember looking at her face in the sliver of light cutting through the trunk gap. Her makeup was running. My shirt was sticking to my back. We were fumbling, whispering frantic affirmations. I need this. I need you. I can't do this life without you. We looked like animals. If someone had opened that trunk, they wouldn't have seen a romance. They would have seen 2 junkies shooting up in an alley. I drove home that day, took a shower to wash the smell of the industrial park and her perfume off my skin, and sat down to dinner. I looked at Sarah. She was telling me about a leak in the roof. I nodded, ate my pasta, and thought about the darkness of that trunk. I felt powerful. I felt like I had a secret superpower. I was a monster. The tolerance built up. The problem with heroin and with affairs is that the tolerance builds. The texts weren't enough anymore. The bi-monthly trunk meetups weren't enough. I started taking risks, taking calls in the garage, leaving the dinner table to check a work email. I became irritable when Elena didn't reply instantly. If Sarah tried to talk to me while I was waiting for a text, I would snap at her. The good father mask was slipping. I wasn't patient anymore because the drug wasn't hitting as hard. I needed more. And I knew, deep down, that the only way to get more was to blow up my life. But I was too cowardly to leave and too addicted to stop. So I did the only thing an addict in a spiral knows how to do. I crashed. The explosion. I didn't get caught. Sarah didn't find a receipt. She didn't snoop through my phone. I confessed. But don't give me credit for that. It wasn't an act of nobility. It was an act of self-immolation. I was exhausted. The double life was physically painful. I felt like my skin was too tight for my body. I wanted to be clean. I wanted the noise in my head to stop. It was a Tuesday night, exactly like the one where I found Leo's cleats. The kids were asleep. Sarah was folding laundry on the sofa, watching some reality TV show. The house was peaceful. I stood in the doorway of the living room, holding a glass of water that I was gripping so hard I thought it might shatter. "Sarah," I said. My voice sounded wrong. It sounded wet. She didn't look up from the laundry. "Yeah, hun? Did you lock the back door? I need to tell you something." She paused then. The tone. She knew the tone. Every wife knows that tone. It's the frequency of disaster. She put down one of Leo's t-shirts. She turned to look at me, and the light in her eyes, that comfortable, tired, trusting light, is the last thing I saw before I murdered our marriage. "I've been seeing someone." The silence that followed was heavy. It had mass. It pressed against my eardrums. "What?" she whispered. It wasn't a scream. It was a breathless confusion. For 2 years, I vomited the words out. Once the tap was open, I couldn't close it. I wanted to hurt her. I wanted to hurt myself. I wanted to burn the house down so there was no place left to hide. Her name is Elena. We text every day. I met her. I met her in her car. I watched Sarah's face crumble. It wasn't cinematic. It was ugly. Her jaw went slack. Her eyes filled with tears, but they didn't fall immediately. She looked like she had been struck in the face with a shovel. 2 years? She choked out. We went to Disney World last year? You were? Yes. My birthday? When you wrote that card? Yes. Who is she? I told her. I told her everything. I told her about the text. I told her about the trunk. I told her that I thought I needed Elena to be happy. I expected screaming. I expected her to throw the vase on the table. Instead, she stood up, walked over to me, and for a second, I thought she was going to hug me. I flinched. She spit in my face. It was shocking, cold and degrading. Sarah, who had never raised a hand to anyone, who killed spiders by carrying them outside in a cup, spit directly in my eye. "Get out," she said. Her voice was guttural. It came from the basement of her soul. "Sarah, get out now." She didn't wake the kids. She didn't want them to see this. She protected them, even while I was destroying her. I packed a bag. I grabbed my laptop, 3 shirts, and my toothbrush. My hands were shaking so bad I couldn't zip the duffel bag. I walked past the kids' rooms. I wanted to open the door and look at them, but I knew I had lost that right. I walked out the front door, the door I had painted 2 summers ago, and got into my car. I sat in the driveway for a moment, the engine idling. I picked up my phone. I had one unread message from Elena. "Elena, thinking of you. Hope your night is peaceful." I stared at the screen. The drug. The heroin. I deleted the thread. I blocked the number. I threw the phone onto the passenger seat. I drove to a Motel 6 off the highway. The room smelled like smoke and disinfectant. I sat on the edge of the bed, the cheap polyester spread scratching my hands, and I waited for the relief of coming clean to hit me. It didn't come, only the cold. I was clean, and I was completely, utterly alone.